Well, each district, and again,
This is like common sense. This is
right, but we agree with LAO that
student-centered, and a student-centered approach. So I'm struggling with why. I'm going to let this go, but it just seems like a lot of work for a lot of people. That is kind of common sense. And if I were a superintendent, maybe I'd walk into my school site and I'd say to the principal, "Okay, what's your response protocol? Hand it me on a piece of paper." I don't think that takes $30 million. I'm just struggle with that.
Just quickly, just to understand better, how much of this funding that we're talking about is currently being used or will be used for direct student services? Because we're talking about, from your testimony, we're talking about building a system of coordinated support to train the teachers, the counselors. So how much of that money will be used for training the teachers who we think, as Mr. O'Donnell mentioned, should already know their students, what students' needs are? So I'm trying to have a better grasp of understanding of how this money is already being used for. But, we don't mind supporting funds and providing more available funds if it goes directly to student services. So could you clarify how much of that is currently being used?
So of the $10 million, $2.5 million is going to go out as direct services to LEAs to actually implement these systems. So there's going to be a lot of training and professional development provided there. And then part of the money is going to the SWIFT Center to provide a lot of special, not special, but professional development and training to the core team, which is Orange County, Butte County, and then kind of to fan out and provide the professional development to regional levels, and then it'll kind of work its way down. So I would say the bulk of the money is for professional development, but in terms of how much of that is going to trainers as opposed to how much of that is going directly to teachers at the schools, I'm not sure how much in addition to the $2.5 million.
I have $2 million going to the SWIFT Center, actually, and as she said, they're going to facilitate the professional learning series, and it's going to be ongoing technical assistance as well to state leadership as well as the regional transformation teams, as well as provide technical assistance to the evaluator on the SWIFT work. We also have $1.458 million going to the Butte County office, and those are for those online resources for teachers. And again, that's directly to the teachers to provide those technical assistance to rural LEAs, and also to provide resources online so anyone can access those resources. And then we have and it's actually $2.72 million that's going to the subgrants. And then we also have another $235,000 that are going to consultants and trainers, and those are experts on customized in-depth training beyond the SWIFT framework. So that really is going closely into LEAs and seeing what is it that you need, what do your students need, and how can we help you meet the needs of those students. And then another $100 million is just for meetings and conferences across the state or statewide, and these will be professional learning institutes that include facility, that'll be, cover the whole, whatever those conferences would include.
And I would just add on the last part, it's 100,000, not 100 million.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well.
That's what I just read. I reached over and I said, did you say 100 million?
Did I?
Any other questions, Ms. Kim? I believe, let me finish with her and I'll get right to you.
I'm sorry.
Are you?
No, I think, thank you. I appreciate LAO raising legitimate concerns for additional $30 million in addition to $10 million we're already discussing here. So I'm going to have a better review and see whether that is currently necessary. So
Yes,
thank you.
Member O'Donnell.
I just think, again, back to my previous point, what if you required as part of a school plan that every school establish a student needs response protocol? Okay, or maybe you even had a CD suggested students response protocol. You could probably put it on one piece of paper. You could take the rest of that money and put it in school counselors. I mean, here we are asking school counselors to do a lot of things, and there aren't that many of them out there, quite frankly. We're under-counselored in the state of California. Now we're up to $30 million, and I don't know when this translates into action on the ground. That's where my concern comes from. Coming from the school side, maybe I know too much, maybe I don't know enough, I don't know. But I just look at this and scratch my head and wonder how does this get to the ground? You know what I mean? Can it be done in a much more efficient manner? So there's where I kind of fall.
Not only efficient, but effective, actually get it done. I believe we're in public comment. We'll get back to that. Ma'am, would you please?
Good morning, members of the subcommittee. Lauren Brady, Statewide Education Rights Project at Public Counsel Law Center. In our work with students, families, teachers, administrators, and school districts, what we know is that in addition to frameworks of support, the state's most vulnerable students need resources for direct student services, on-the-ground programming that specifically addresses their unique needs, keeps them in school, and improves school climate. Programs like restorative justice, positive behavior interventions and supports, and trauma-informed services. In order to make these kinds of programs a reality, investments must be made in training teachers with high-quality professional development and in specifically prioritizing school districts with high levels of racial and ethnic disproportionality in exclusionary school discipline policies, not just in one part of California, but throughout the state. Per the coalition letter that was already referenced, we are asking for support of clearly articulated budget language that ensures that this new funding addresses the critical need for on-the-ground programs at the district and school site level to support keeping those most vulnerable students in school throughout California.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Alice Kessler. I'm here representing the SELPA administrators of California, and I just wanted to make a couple points and appreciate the discussion. First of all, the origin of this funding that was first in last year's budget was the statewide special education task force, which was a really large effort involving multiple stakeholders, experts in the field. And this multi-tiered systems of support was a very large part of the task force recommendations. I've been in contact with Maureen Burness, who was the co-chair of the task force, and she's taking a close look at this item and I think has a lot of thoughts to share. So as this moves forward, we'd like to work with the committee, the Department of Finance, and the LAO to share our recommendations, looking at some of the evidence-based practices for how best to support this. I think that we would say that $30 million is needed. We would ask that you not reduce that amount. We think this is actually a pretty monumental undertaking to really implement MTSS. So we would like to work within that $30 million and hopefully develop some avenues and strengthen the proposal here. So we stand at the ready to assist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Good morning, committee members. Jackie Wong with the National Center for Youth Law. I want to kind of support the comments that my previous colleagues made, but specifically, it's also very important for our students in foster care as well as the juvenile justice system, right? The question, I think, is it common sense? I also want to speak to kind of my background as a former school district administrator with Oakland Unified School District, who actually was in charge of expulsions and reducing expulsion suspensions to meet zero, along with kind of these multi-tiered systems of support. What I've heard back is that we were trying to allow our teachers to become instructional leaders within their classrooms. How do they do that without kind of the supports, the counselors, the school-based social workers that are necessary, right? That needs to happen in a very coordinated manner. I think that, again, time and time again, I would get those calls from the district office. How do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? Is that the infrastructure needs to be there. The training needs to be there for the teachers, the counselors, the school climate, as well as, as Brad said earlier, the janitors, right? Again, this is not something that teachers actually go to school for, right? How do you change behavior? It is actually absolutely something that a school-based counselor does and a school-based social worker does. So I actually believe that $30 million is a small investment for over 1,000 school districts in the state of California to kind of change their mindset and allow our teachers to be, again, instructional leaders and increase the education of our students in foster care and system-involved youth and other at-risk youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Hi, this is Brian Lee on behalf of Fight Crime, Invest in Kids, and over 400 police chiefs, sheriffs, district attorneys, and crime victims. And as Assemblymember O'Donnell said, action on the ground is the key, which is why we really support the $30 million and the language that's been referenced in the joint letter, because we want action on the ground and not just the frameworks, which are important, but you need the action on the ground. Whenever we've been talking about reducing suspensions, what we hear from parents and teachers is how important it is to have that training. And this would be really the first real state investment in that kind of training. It costs a lot of money. We've looked at the LCAPs for the largest districts. In Elk Grove, $3 million they do in training for things like PBIS and restorative practices. So we think this is a small investment to make it so that districts everywhere can do these important investments, reduce suspensions, and improve behavior. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Members, Jeff Frost, representing the Orange County Department of Education. Sorry I'm late. Had to be in 3 places at one time. We are here in support of not only the $10 million that's currently in law, but the $30 million that's being discussed here in committee. Actually, Superintendent Maharis and members of the team will be in Sacramento tomorrow. We'll be meeting with the chairman, with committee consultants, and the Department of Finance to look at the $30 million, to look at how it might best go out. Clearly, there is a need. The question is how it should be structured in the context of the scaffolding that's being done in the current grant with $10 million to ensure that there is quality support in every region of the state so that these services can be provided by districts who don't have the training or the knowledge. There will be a support system in place. So that's really a key component. I do know that part of the $30 million is designed to go directly to LEAs. I think there needs to be some discussion about that so that it goes out in the manner that's best used by those districts in the most reasonable manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Dennis Cuevas Romero here on behalf of the California Latinas for Reproductive Justice. With your approval, hoping to provide public comment on the previous item, issue item 1, where we were not allowed public
We're going to go back to that right after we finish yours,
thank
though.
you.
If you're at number 1, we're going to go back and catch it after we finish this. Okay. Are we done on this? This item 3, I believe this is a hold open. So now we're going to go back and clean up the schedule because we had a little confusion when we were passing the thing. So we're first going to go to public comment on issue number 1, which is estate operations. So we've already voted on that, but we're going to allow everybody to make some comments on that. So this is issue number 1, state operation. Does anybody wish to speak on that from the public?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, Dennis Cuevas Romero here on behalf of the California Latinas for Reproductive Justice. We are one of 5 co-sponsoring organizations from Dr. Weber's California Healthy Youth Act from last year, AB 329. AB 329 is one of about 9 or 10 legislation that is now has become law that is awaiting funding from the health frameworks as part of the IQC funding. Also as part of the $1.2 million that CDE's requesting in their BCP. Our organization is pushing to support that ask. We've put together a sign-on letter with various legislators that have passed bills in support of this funding. So we would appreciate the chair and the Department of Finance consideration in the May revise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Gregory Kramer on behalf of Planned Parenthood Affiliates of California, also echoing support for item number 1 with the $1.2 million budget change proposal by the Department of Education to fund the Instructional Quality Commission. As Dennis had previously mentioned, a number of bills have not been fully enacted because of delays to updating the curriculum frameworks. And in fact, the health framework has last substantively been amended in 1994, so there is a lot of room for improvement and updating that needs to occur. So with that, we respectfully request this committee approve the budget change proposal that the Department of Education suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Tenny Adewomi with Black Women for Wellness. We are here in support of the proposed increases in funding for the CDE's state operations and also approving in support of the additional funding for additional positions for the CDE.
Thank you very much.
Maya Ingram from the ACLU of California in support of providing funding for the IQC. The ACLU was a co-sponsor of AB 329. There's been great advances in health education laws that have been passed by the legislature, and it's time to fund the commission so the health framework can update and the youth of California can get the benefit of those advances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Terry Burns on behalf of California School Boards Association. We too support the funding for the IQC. They're doing yeoman's work over there. There are many, many frameworks and materials they'll need approving to keep us up to date with Common Core and so forth. So we appreciate your support.
Thank you very much for your comments. Are there any others? So getting back on the schedule, I believe we need to do issue 2, Proposition 47. So this is, I believe we have 3 presentations. So Rebecca Hamilton from the Department of Finance will go first. And then we're back on track. You happy now? Sorry about that. I didn't know I was going to get to do this until he threw the mallet at me. So now we get to go. Yes, Ms. Hamilton. Proposition 47.
Good morning. Rebecca Hamilton with Department of Finance. The 2016-17 governor's budget provides $29.3 million in total Proposition 47 savings. Of this amount, $7.3 million is available for the Department of Education to administer a grant program. The intent of that grant program is to improve outcomes for K-12 public school students by reducing truancy and supporting students who are at risk of dropping out of school and are victims of crime. A stakeholder work group is currently developing framework, and it is expected that legislation will be enacted to implement that framework. We continue to look at the savings factors, and we could have a revised estimate of the savings at the May revise. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being very concise. Ms. Brown.
Deborah Brown on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson. We would just note that we've been part of the stakeholder process on how the fund should be distributed, and so it's been a helpful and good process to really talk through and with stakeholders on allocating the dollars. And so we'll continue to work with them. We would be remiss if we didn't note the need for some administrative funding for the Department of Education to administer the grant and do evaluations on the funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. Ms. Collins from the LAO.
Natasha Collins, Legislative Analyst Office. I'll just provide a little bit of information on Prop 47 quickly for those who aren't familiar. This was an initiative that was approved by voters in 2014 that reduced penalties for certain non-serious and non-violent property and drug offenses and required savings from those reductions to go towards a special fund to benefit various other areas. 65% of those savings is required to go to the Board of State and Community Corrections for mental health and substance abuse programs. 25% is required to go to the Department of Education, which we're discussing today, towards truancy and dropout prevention programs to be administered as a grant program by the CDE. And 10% is for victims programs, specifically towards trauma recovery centers. So this is going to be the first year that we are realizing these savings, and they're going towards these programs. The Department of Finance was tasked with estimating what the savings would be. Their overall estimate is about $30 million, 25% of which are going towards truancy and dropout prevention programs, so 7.3, as Ms. Hamilton mentioned. Our office's corrections analysts estimates are quite a bit higher than the Department of Finance's estimates on what the savings from Prop 47 would be, in the range of about $100 million higher. In 16-17, our analysts believe that the Department of Finance estimates that the savings are too low and that the costs are too high. So kind of what's coming out is a lower estimate than our office would make. I believe this has been discussed in Assembly Sub 5. With regard to how the truancy and dropout prevention funding would be spent, our office has recommended that we allocate the Proposition 47 funds here to schools that have the highest concentrations of at-risk students, and then give them that flexibility in order to address the needs of their students with regard to dropout and truancy, consistent with the approach that the state has taken in terms of providing flexibility to local districts to meet their students' needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the dais for our panel? Mr. O'Donnell or Ms. Kim? None? Seeing none, can we have public comment, please?
Morning, Chair and members. Brad Strong with Children Now. We've been very supportive of the leadership that's been provided by Assemblyman Thurman and Senator Liu. The legislative staff over the interim has led a working group and a significant conversation with stakeholders. We're very supportive of the direction and conversations of that stakeholder work group in terms of the methods for how these dollars will be distributed. And I think on a much bigger question for this committee and the legislature as a whole is upholding the public trust. And I think there's a lot of expectations in terms of the trade-offs that we're going to take savings and invest in prevention and support for communities and to reduce the pipeline to prison. Education gets 25% of that. Two things on that. One is that we think that we agree with the Legislative Analyst's Office and the California Budget Project also both did in-depth analyses and project much greater savings. So we really would encourage the legislature to make that additional investment, just to uphold the public trust. Reasonable minds will differ. Finance has their numbers. Reasonable minds will differ. But to maintain public trust, we urge the legislature to make it right and make sure that those investments are there from the savings. And I think those numbers are right. The other is making sure that these dollars are really on top of the minimum guarantee. I think the public didn't think that they were going to take savings and then not really give education any additional money. And when they're programmed from within the existing 98 and not on top of, we've provided no additional money from the savings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Hi, I'm Ernie Silva from Sciatech. We're a network of dropout recovery schools, as you know, in Long Beach, Sacramento, and Oceanside. What I do want to suggest is we think this is a really important program. We've spent a lot of time working with UC San Diego in developing a trauma-infused care program for the Coachella Valley, where we have schools as well. What we'd like to do is encourage being added into at least conversations on the stakeholders. Sometimes the idea of dropout recovery programs are kind of forgotten when we talk about prevention, but once we've re-engaged a student, we're also concerned about dropout prevention. And we know that one of the two things that make a big difference in keeping people out of that schools to prison pipeline are first a diploma and second a job, and our program is designed to do those two things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good morning. Pamela Gibbs, representing the Los Angeles County Office of Education. I won't repeat the comments that were made earlier regarding perhaps rebenching Prop 98 to address the needs of the amount of funding coming from the grant program, but I will say that the Los Angeles County Office of Education does have an Operation Graduation every year, whereby we graduate many of our pupils who are in the largest incarcerated facilities throughout the state. And in that vein, one of our main priorities has always been to reduce truancies and to address dropout recovery for these pupils. So we're very much engaged in this issue. We want to work with the administration and the department to make sure that the funds are being used in a way that we can improve upon our access or improve upon our efforts so far. And we think by rebenching this money and not simply putting it back into Prop 98 would be a way to do that. So we urge your support in accomplishing that goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Next, please.
Good morning, Martha Albers. I'm with the Association of California School Administrators. Similar to the prior speakers, AXA also supports the intent of Prop 47 to reinvest the savings from the initiative into school grants for truancy and dropout prevention programs. We believe it's a wise investment. We would just urge the legislature, given that there's no details about the grant program, that there's more flexibility for school districts on how to use the funding. We do not have a position on the LAO versus the Department of Finance numbers, whether it's $100 million or $30 million, but it is really a small amount of money going out to schools, so it just really needs to be a streamlined and simplified program. Similar to the committee analysis, and as the prior speakers have indicated, there's a concern also that we have regarding the Prop 98 dollars and not rebenching Prop 98. We do believe it has to be above and beyond what Prop 98 minimum guarantee should be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Ron Rapp speaking on behalf of the California Federation of Teachers. We're in strong support of Prop 47 and using those dollars to prevent dropouts and to address truancy. We are dismayed that the governor's estimate, Department of Finance estimate, is so low. We agree with the LAO that we need to recalculate the savings. We think it's significantly higher. And if you remember when Prop 47 was going on the ballot, those savings were estimated at $100 to $150 million a year. So the governor's numbers are way too low. We suggest that we recalculate those savings. And again, we're in support of using those savings for dropout prevention as well as addressing the issue of truancy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment for this issue? I believe this one's supposed to be held open, so we'll move.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, please.
Just quickly, I guess it's for the Department of Finance, and the point's been made, I believe, by 3 speakers, and that is we will see no additional funds beyond Prop 98.
That's correct.
Correct.
So this program created a new program in Proposition 98, and the language of the proposition did not expressly state the treatment for rebenching purposes. So it's consistent with past practices and consistent with the current law that no rebenching is required.
So the mission of Prop 98 expanded, but the dollars did not.
It's a new program. So yes, it's a new
So yes,
program inside
correct?
the guarantee.
Okay. Yeah, but the legislature could, if it so desired, allocate dollars for this, I assume. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any others? Okay, we're going to go on now to item number 4, state special schools. All right. I believe our first testimony will be from the Department of Finance. Ms. Quasim-Barth.
Molly Quasim-Barth again, Department of Finance. There are 3 state special schools in the state that are operated by the Department of Education that provide programs for students with specific disabilities. The School for the Deaf in Riverside, the School for the Blind, and the School for the Deaf in Fremont. In 2015, they served about 850 students, and about half of these students lived at the schools. CDD also operates 3 diagnostic centers across the state to conduct comprehensive assessments for students with disabilities and provide training and professional development opportunities for teachers, special education staff, and families. The governor's budget includes $92 million for the state's special schools and the diagnostic centers. $54 million of this is in Proposition 98 General Fund, and $37 million is in not Proposition 98. The budget includes $3 million in new funds, primarily for employee benefits. The governor's budget also includes $13 million for the state special schools for payments on their lease revenue bonds. The budget includes a control section to provide about $500 million general fund to address a critical deferred maintenance backlog at a number of state facilities, of which the state special schools will receive $4 million. The schools have submitted a list of their top priority deferred maintenance projects to finance, and the control section requires the Department of Finance to provide a list of all the deferred maintenance projects that will be funded with this money to the legislature before the funds will be allocated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Brown from the Department of Education.
Deborah Brown on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Torlakson. We would note our support for the $4 million for deferred maintenance and also the support for the funding for the Middle School Activity Center. We believe that the very mission of the California School for the Deaf in Fremont is to create a visual learning environment for all students. So that they can learn, develop an appreciation for diversity, and lead fulfilling lives by partaking in school partnerships with peers, families, and communities. And without a place such as the Middle School Activity Center, the middle school students there are denied the opportunity of participating and learning from a supervised quality community setting that is part of the California School for the Deaf's mission. And these students have no suitable place to gather socially and linguistically, which is essential to their behavioral and career development that leads to becoming well-adjusted, independent, and self-supporting individuals. And now that the California School for the Deaf has has been required to close the existing middle school activity center. The students do not have a designated area that provides adequate opportunities to develop the healthy deaf identities that they acquire through shared experiences, language, culture, history, and regular meaningful social engagements. And the lack of the appropriate facilities limits the opportunity for these most vulnerable students to interact with one another, so that they are stunted linguistically and socially. Again, as noted, 60% of the students live in the cottages, and the middle school activity center provides a place for them to congregate, have safe, supervised activities. So we would urge your support for the funding for the activity center.
Okay. LAO?
Deferred maintenance issue. We do recommend approving the governor's proposal to spend $4 million additional non-Prop 98 on addressing the deferred maintenance backlog at the state special schools. We note that there's currently a pretty substantial backlog of maintenance projects that need to be completed at the state special schools. Our current list, I believe, is around $17 million. And this seems like an opportune time to make this investment to address those repairs, so that the state doesn't have to address costlier repairs in the future, and the students at these schools have safe and well-maintained facilities. We would note, however, that we would recommend adopting budget bill language, ensuring that these dollars are spent on in addition to and not instead of the dollars that the state special schools spend out of their operating budgets normally to address these maintenance backlog issues. Typically, the state special schools spend about $2 million a year, and last year, when the state provided an additional $3 million for addressing deferred maintenance, the budget bill included maintenance of effort requirement that they spend 1.8 out of their operating budget, and we think the same language would apply this year. As for the middle school activity center, we are recommending that the legislature reject this proposal. While we believe that the state special schools have done some valuable programmatic activities while they've had this center available, we think this is ultimately an issue of a want to have and not a need to have. We think that this is a relatively expensive proposal that would benefit a relatively small number of students, and that if the legislature is interested in investing further in the state special schools, that it would make sense to dedicate even more funding for addressing the still substantial backlog of maintenance issues at those schools. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. I'll have a question on this, and I know that public comment on this. Do you want to do? Yeah, we'll do public comment on this in a second. But you know, I have a hard time with this issue, and by no means do I want to sound so I'm not sympathetic and want to address this population of deaf and blind students. But it just seems that, you know, we're a state of nearly 40 million people, and we're talking 950 kids. And so by our math, by my math, it's 0.00002% of the population get to be served here. We spend, 90-something million plus these add-ons. And so, if they're the 950 families, they're very fortunate. They have, top first class facility that, many people in the same situation don't get access to. There's one, of course, in Fremont and one in Riverside. But if you don't live in those areas, how does this relate to you? And I just don't know how. I mean, long term, is this the way it makes sense, or should we give monies to local communities to do the type of programs at the local level? I just, from the state purpose, having two of these facilities and serving such a small number, such a huge state, I can't get my head around. I had the same issue last year as well, and I'm not sure if there's an answer for that today, or if anybody wants to opine on that issue. Did you want? You're shaking your head, and yes or no?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. So first, I would note that We do have two very different populations of students here, those who are deaf and those who are blind. The issues for those two students are a little different. For students who are deaf, there's a really particular need related to communication, which is something that I think is difficult to appreciate for those of us with normal hearing levels. Many of these, the vast majority of students who are deaf have families that are composed of people with normal hearing levels. They go to schools where the vast majority of other students have normal hearing levels and are thus not able to participate in the normal spontaneous conversation that all students require in order to develop normal cognitive, social, and communicative skills.
I get that, but needless to say, there are probably way more than 950 kids in California that need these services, and they don't all get in. And
Yes.
so have we ever thought about it'd be better to spread the money out so that individuals who don't get the treatment maybe, can get more treatment throughout the state, or have this full-on program for a very select, 0.00002% of the state population?
So at the moment, I think that's a very good question, because in fact our office is in the process of completing a report looking at how the state serves deaf and hard of hearing students, and answering this question of how better do we serve the majority of those students who are not attending the state special schools.